some very important people are present here tonight who come to support those in Cyprus and this event for the Cyprus Week at the Ayios. With us we have the Cyprus High Commissioner for Neochorion and Famagusta, who is 40 years have passed since the brutal invasion and occupation of our beloved island, but it still seems like yesterday when we heard those sirens in the early hours of the 20th of July, 1974. I'd like to read an extract written by Christopher Hitchens, and it's about someone you all know, Henry Kissinger. Kissinger approved of the preparations by Greek Cypriot fascists for the murder of President Makarios and sanctioned the coup which tried to extend the rule of the Athens junta, a favoured client of his, to the island. When, despite great waste of life, this coup failed in its objective, which was also Kissinger's of enforced partition, Kissinger promiscuously switched sides to support an even bloodier intervention by Turkey. Thomas Boyett, who was the US Director of Cyprus Affairs then, went to Kissinger in advance of the anti-Makarios push and warned him that it could lead to a civil war. Spare me the civics lecture, replied Kissinger, who, as you readily see, had an aphorism for all occasions. Mr. Kissinger, over 200,000 refugees, nearly 30% of the population of the Republic of Cyprus, were displaced, living in refugee camps, and many living here in the diaspora. Tonight we have with us 4 stories with memories of the pain and the loss of life, the loss of the homes, the loss of our churches, our culture, and our villages. The first story is of a young girl called Kika Kattirtzi. You all know her as Kika Kattirtzi. She's from Ayios Amvrosios, and Kika was 19 years old in 1974. She's also the secretary of Lobby for Cyprus. Unfortunately, Kika finds it very emotional when she talks about 1974. And I'd like to call Lisa Elizabeth Mansangu, the young generation from Ayios Amvrosios, to please come and please read Kika's story. Please.
Memories of 1974 are still fresh for those who lived through the black days of war. Time has not yet faded the events. The following is an account by Kika, a refugee who fled from Ayios Amvrosios in the Kythrea district of occupied Cyprus. I was in Ayios Amvrosios in the best years of my life. At that young age, you make dreams and you live them. But suddenly, on the morning of the 20th of July, everything was stopped in its tracks. Only a few of my personal belongings remained after the war. In 1974, amongst those items I brought with me when I came to England was my diary. I look through it every July because I do not want to leave these events to be forgotten, as there was an invasion and the occupation continues. Here are some extracts. Saturday, 20th of July, 1974. It never crossed my mind that how I woke up today could ever happen to me. Around 5:30 a.m., I awoke to the sound of bombs from Turkish warplanes. Turkey began a military attack on Cyprus. Turkish planes are plowing through the blue sky. My brother came to my mind. He is in the army. My mother began to cry and wail. She is only thinking of her son. He has completed only 6 months of military service and is in the first front in Kythrea. Everybody in the village was panicking. Young children, like me, ran to our high school as it was on a higher position, and from there we could see what was happening in the sea of Kythrea. We saw 2 Turkish warships and the fire and smoke coming from them. We run home, scared. All the fellow villagers are scared and running to hide in the valleys and caves. My father gathered all of us in the orchard with apricot trees. Beneath the leaf-laden trees, and irritated for the moment by the sounds of insects, we couldn't see anything, but we could hear the terrifying noise of aircraft bombing. Feelings could not be described. A look around says it all. Women were kneeling to pray and sing all the psalms they knew. We stayed in the orchard to hide until the afternoon. My father went to the coffee shop to see what was happening. He came home and told us that the village hospital needed volunteers, and it was a good idea to go and help. So I went there and stayed for the whole night. Monday, 22nd of July, 1974. The first refugees from Kythrea arrived in the village. They stayed in the primary school. We cooked in the hospital all day to offer at least a little food for the first arrivals. Today, some wounded soldiers from Kythrea came to the hospital and we took care of them. On their faces you could see pain and suffering. They told us how much they had suffered in the last 2 days in battles in Kythrea, and we cried with them. Wednesday, 14th of August, 1974, the second stage of the war. I woke up at 4:45 a.m. with the first sounds of bombs from the warships on the eastern side of Kythrea. Soon, Turkish military aircraft started bombing it again for a second time. The mountain range of Dendadaktylos is burning again. The village emptied. My father's brother is the only one in the family who had a truck. He unloaded all the watermelons and gathers the family together. But he does not want to leave the village. It is in his blood. My father told me how my uncle once went to work in Lefkara, and when it started to get dark, he insisted on going back to his village to sleep. He never likes to sleep away from his house. So now he went to the forest of Amvrosios, a few kilometers outside the village, and then into the woods of Ibadi. It is morning, 11:30 already, and the warplanes never stopped bombing. I sit under an olive tree, and from there I can see 4 ships at sea. The planes fly so low that I feel from minute to minute they are going to bomb us. I'm scared. Nobody knows whether they will survive tonight. 3 o'clock this afternoon passed, and with the fear and terror growing because the planes have not stopped passing us, we decided to go to the village to see what was happening. Nobody was there. Facing terror, they had all left. We went home and got some necessities. I ran to make my bed because in the morning with all the panic I left it unmade, and I didn't want to find it unmade when I came home later. My younger sister, influenced by the story of the book Refugee, which she was reading those days about the Asia Minor catastrophe, ran to the yard and took some soil. The middle sister ran to the cupboard and took all the family photographs. My mother, with tears in her eyes, ran to get some gold jewellery, and I heard her say, "There is a war, we may need to sell them for a piece of bread." We crossed the village from one end to the other in my uncle's truck. Everyone had left the village. We started for the unknown with no hope. When you hear on one side sounds of ships, and on the other aircraft, it does not leave you with any hope. From moment to moment, you wait for your turn to die. I wasn't worried about myself. I was thinking only of all those who are fighting, my uncles, my cousins, and many others who I knew were in the army. We had already heard that my brother was a prisoner in a hospital in Turkey. Who knows if he is going to survive? My mind stops here. I can write no more. We were travelling until sunset. Some people we saw advised us the best place to go was the English bases. Eventually, after some problems, we arrived in an orchard with orange trees in Neochorion. I couldn't believe that we were to stay there for the night and sleep under the trees. Thursday, 15th of August 1974. I woke early under the orange trees. Even though it was August, I was cold. I hope this is for a few days and I will soon return to our village. God knows. I cannot believe I am far from my home. We do not know if we are to survive, and I am thinking of my home. They have taken the north of Cyprus. I heard they have taken Kythrea, Kythrea, and now heading for Famagusta. Friday, 16th of August, 1974. One more day under the orange trees. In the afternoon, the village authorities allowed us to go and stay in the school building. We're supposed to stay in one classroom with other families. Here they took a register of refugees. At least they gave us a meal and some blankets. I stayed in Avoro until the 21st of August. Later, I went with my family to Bendagomo, a small village in Limassol, which I never knew existed, and stayed until the 30th of August, again in a school building. From there, we went to Lefkara, where we were allocated an empty house. We cleaned it and settled there. I was there until the 16th of November, 1974, and left temporarily for London until the occupation ends in Cyprus. The memories are still painful as the occupation continues. My brother is still missing. His name is included in the list of missing persons, and his name was whispered by my father when he passed away. Some of the soil my sister took from our village in 1974 was placed on my father's grave. My mother still dresses in black and has a memorial for him every year. The agony knowing what happened to her son is still there. I visited my house in the village 5 years ago, but wish I had not. It was better for me to keep the memories of it as it was when I left on the 14th of August 1974. Most important, though, is that the land remains there waiting for us. Perhaps the house will be destroyed and the trees my father and grandfather planted may not survive, but our children and grandchildren will bring them back.
We'll now proceed with a song by Nikos Savidis, a song of Rigas Pereos, Sasaranda. Nico. Everyone has έχουμε τους στίχους. Για θέλετε να τραγουδήσει μαζί με τον Νίκο.
Να ευχαριστήσω ξανά και πέτρος Κολόμπικο Cyprus για την πρόσκληση, το Θέατρο Τέχνης για την φιλοξενία και 40 χρόνια νομίζω είναι υπέροχα για όλους εμάς τους πρόσφυγες. Οπότε αν έγραψα αυτό το τραγούδι πριν ένα μήνα μου λέγεται Ρίγας Φρέος στα 40 μας. Τα πρώτα 100 χρόνια φαίνεται να είναι δύσκολα.
Εσύ καλά μας τα λέγες, μα εμείς που να σκεφτούμε τα λόγια σου τα άγια, πως θα τα ξανακούμε. Εσύ καλά μας έδειχνες, μα εμείς που να το δούμε τα λόγια σου τα αιώνια, πως θα έρθουν να μας βρούνε. Καλύτερα κρίσεις το γένος την κατάδια του και ποιον να πρωτοφθήσεις. Που είσαι τώρα λίγα μου να φύς και να φωτίσεις σε γένος αλληλεύθερο να φύς να ξαναζήσεις. Καλύτερα μιας ώρας μας έλεγες εσύ, μα εμάς 40 χρόνια μας σκέπασε σιωπή, μα εμάς 40 χρόνια μας σκέπασε σιωπή, μας σκέπασε σιωπή. Εσένα σε σκοτώσανε μες της φλαβιάς τους μύχους, μα της ψυχής με όνειμα θα ακούμε τους στίχους. Καλύτερα μιας ώρας μας έλεγες εσύ, μα εμάς 40 χρόνια μας σκέπασε σιωπή, μα εμάς 40 χρόνια μας σκέπασε σιωπή, μας σκέπασε σιωπή. Μας σκέπασε σιωπή.
Πότε ακούστηκε η φωνή μας. 40 χρόνια πότε ακούστηκε η φωνή μας.
Θα ήθελα τώρα να καλέσω τον Michael και τη Maria Kashis, τον Αντώνη τον Kythrea και τον Γιώργο τον Michael. Ο Γιώργος τον Michael.
Σεβαίνονται οι πενταγωνιστές υπηρεγείς προπιωτίες, αδέρφια, συμπατριώτες.
Πρώτον από δύο λόγους για τους οποίους δεν θα ήθελα απόψε να μιλήσω εδώ. Το πρώτο είναι γιατί δεν μου αρέσει να μιλώ για τον εαυτό μου. Με παίρνουν οι συναισθηματισμοί. Αυτό είναι ένας λόγος. Και ο δεύτερος λόγος, γιατί απόψε είναι τα γενέθλιά μου και εγώ πρέπει να είμαι μαζί να δώσω και τα παιδιά μου. Κι όμως, όταν με κάθεσε το λόπι και είδε και την Δευτέρα των Ενθουσιασμών του Κυρίου Ευγενίου, εδώ που κρατεί εδώ σαν προπήγιο αγωνιστικό της παροικίας, λέω δεν μπορώ να λείψω από αυτή την εκδήλωση. Αν δεν είναι πάλι συναισθηματισμός, μπορούμε από τώρα σε χώρα. Μαζί με την Μαρία καταγόμαστε από το Neochorion and Famagusta. Όλη η γενιά, όσο πίσω, πόσα χρόνια πίσω και αν πάμε, η πρόπαπή μας ήταν από το Neochorion and Famagusta. Το Neochorion and Famagusta είναι ένα χωριό στους αυτούς που δεν το ξέρουν, στους πρόποδες του Κανταδαχτύλου και μπροστά του ξαπλώνεται η πεδιάδα της Μεσαωρίας. Ήταν ευλογημένο χωριό και ευεργετείται από τα τροχούμενα νερά του κεφάλου Χρυσού. Και ήταν γεωργικό, κτηνοτροφικό και εργαζόντουσαν αρκετοί στην Λευκοσία, ένα πολύ προοδευτικό χωριό. Και οι κάτοικοι του πολύ καλοί. σαν όπως τα προηγούμενα μοιράζαμε νερά του κεφαλοπλήσου και τα σπαρτά ποτίζαμε καθίσει με την Ελλάδα, έτσι τις μοιραζόμαστε. Και θλίψη και χαρά. Για βρέχει σε όλο το χωριό, για σε όλο είναι ηλιακά. Αυτό δείχνει ακριβώς το πνεύμα το οποίο κρατούσε τα χρόνια εκείνα στο χωριό της. Ήταν ένα μεικτό χωριό. Περίπου 1.700 Έλληνες Κύπροι και γύρω στους 200 με 250 Τούρκο-Κύπριους. Το σπίτι το δικό μου, που γεννήθηκα, ήταν το τελευταίο σπίτι της χριστιανικής γειτονιάς που πλησίαζε μαζί με την τουρκική γειτονιά. Ήμουν γείτονας με το Φώτσα. Η πρώτη παιδική μου φίλη ήταν Τουρκοκύπρη. Γείτονα. Ο πατέρας μου ήταν βοσκός και τα πρόβατα του τα είχε σμίξει μαζί με τον Τούρκο-Κύπριο βοσκό, τον Μαμούτη, με τα παιδιά του οποίου είχαμε πολύ καλές φιλίες. Είχαμε δύο εκκλησίες. Η μια ήταν του Αγίου Χαραλάμπους και του Προδρόμου και η τρίτη του Αγίου Νικολάου, η οποία μετετράπη σε τζαμί το 1645 όταν οι Τούρκοι ήρθαν στην Κύπρο το 1971. Την εκκλησία του Αγίου Νικολάου τη μετέτρεψαν σε τζαμί και την είχαν σχολή. Είχαμε κοινά καφενεία, κοινούς αγώνες. Μάλιστα, στην ποδοσφαιρική ομάδα του χωριού μας έπαιζαν και Τούρκοι. Μένα, εγώ που είμαι μικρός, ήρωάς μου τότε ήταν ο τερματοφύλακας ο οποίος το Σαμί και απέκτησαν ένα πέναλτι από την ποδοσφαιρική ομάδα της Kythreas, με τους οποίους είμαστε πάντα αντίπαλοι και τον είχα τον ήρωα για να δείξετε πόσες καλές σχέσεις υπήρχαν μεταξύ των Ελληνοκυπρίων και των Τουρκοκυπρίων. Αυτό μέχρι το 1963. Οπότε έφυγαν όλοι από το χωριό και μετά πήγαν στην Επιχώ, ένα τουρκικό χωριό πιο κάτω, και στο Τσάκος. Αυτό έδειχνε πόσο καλοσχεδιασμένες ήταν οι κινήσεις των Τούρκων. Τα λέω των Τούρκων, δυστυχώς οι Τουρκοκύπροι δεν μπορούσαν να έχουν λόγο για την κοινότητα και σε ακολουθούσαν. Ιουλίου 1974. Ημέρα Δευτέρα, 8 και 20 το πρωί, το Ραδιοφωνικό Ίδρυμα Κύπρου αναγγέλει ότι είχε γίνει πραξικόπημα και ότι ο Μακάριος ήταν νεκρός. Εγώ έλαχε την ημέρα εκείνη να είμαι στον Πεδουλά, γιατί ήμουν υπεύθυνος των παιδικών κατασκηνώσεων της ΚΟΕΔ. Είμαι δάσκαλος στο επάγγελμα και είμαι υπεύθυνος για τις παιδικές κατασκηνώσεις. Ήρθα στο χωριό μετά από 2 μέρες. Το κλίμα πια ήταν πολύ διαφορετικό μεταξύ των συγχωριανών.
Ήταν πολύ καταμένο που οι πραξικοπηματίες δούσαν στον τρόπο που ταυτευτεί τραβηγώντας τους ανθρώπους. Μιλώντας στους ανθρώπους εκείνους που είχαν υπόψη τους ότι μπορούσαν να ήταν εναντίον τους. Πέρασαν οι μέρες, το BBC ανάγγελε την Τρίτη, θυμάμαι, ο Μιχάλης Ελευθερίδας στο Τελβάνι, την Τετάρτη είχε σε κάτω, μπόρεσες, διότι ήταν όλα κλειστά. Και έλεγε το BBC ότι ήταν 40 αποβατικά σκάφη έτοιμα να απολύσουν προς την Κερίνια και να αποβιβαστούν σε αυτές τις Κερίνιες και να καταλάβουν τον τόπο. Όταν το είπα κάπου, δεν το πίστευα. Μένα τουλάχιστον με απείλησαν κιόλας να μην μιλώ, διότι θα με σκότωνα. Και επειδή μου είπε η γειτόνισσα, είσαι γέλιος, για όνομα του Θεού. Μην μιλάς, θα σου κάνω και κανένα κακό. Λέω της, μα τι κακό πια να μας κάνει. Ήδη ωραία η καταστροφή άρχισε να φαίνεται. Πήγαιναν και έρχονταν οι πραξικοπηματίες στο σπίτι και φώναζαν την κυρία Παντομιχάλη. Ο Μιχάλης τους είπα, δεν είναι, ακόμα δεν είστε. Είναι στο Πεδουλά, δεν είστε ακόμα. Διότι είχαμε έναν τουφέκιο, το οποίο ήταν του Μακαρίου πατέρα μου, κυνηγετικό, το οποίο έπρεπε να το παραδώσει. Αλλά η σκοπή ήταν άλλη. Η σκοπή τους ήταν για να το συλλάβουν, αλλά κάποιοι επέμβηκαν και μου είπαν, μετά μας είπαν, όταν πέρασαν τα ζαρδείς και όλα, ότι του μας έκανα χάρη και γλίτωσε. Δεν ξέρω τι χάρη, ποιος επέμβηκε και δεν τον σκότωσε. Το Σάββατο το πρωί, θυμάμαι, άρχισαν τα αεροπλάνα από η ώρα 4 και βγαίναν και έρχοντα. Εγώ, επειδή ήμουν έγκυος, ήμουν 8 μηνών, δεν κοιμούν. Και του λέω του Μιχάλη, τον ξύπνησα και του λέω, κάτι θα γίνει. Θα φαίνεται ότι θα επέμβουν. Γύρω στις 4:30 ο Μιχάλης πήγε κάτω στη μηχανή, είχαμε μια διάκριση και πήγαινε εκεί για να ξεκινήσει να θυμάσει τη μηχανή, διότι έπρεπε να της αλλάξει το λάδι. Και είδαν εκεί τι γινόταν, επέστρεψαν πίσω, το ραδιόφωνο φώναζε όλοι να πάνε στο στρατό. Ο Μιχάλης ετοιμάστηκε και έφυγε, πήγε στο στρατό. Εμείς έμειναμε στο σπίτι, εγώ με 2 παιδιά και η μητέρα. Περάσαμε τρομερές στιγμές. Τα αεροπλάνα πήγαιναν και έρχονταν, εκτυπούσαν, οι σφαίρες επέφταναν οι κάλικοι των σφαιρών πάνω στο σπίτι, από πάνω. Ο γείτονας μας πήγε να πάει στην αστυνομία να τους φωνάξει να έρθουν να τις μαζέψουν. Γέμασαν οι αυλάδες από σφαίρες.
Σάββατο, 20 του Ιουλίου, μια εβδομάδα μετά από το πράξικο μας και μια εβδομάδα, σηκώστηκα από το πρωί γιατί είχαμε μια μηχανή που είχαμε νερό, να πατήσω το περβόλι και είδα, βλέπω τώρα, ξεκίνησα τη μηχανή και από τη μεριά της Αμvrosios. Ερχόντουσαν τουρκικά αεροπλάνα, 3-3, ένα, όχι πολύ ψηλά, και προχωρούσαν προς την κατεύθυνση μιας δουλειάς μαύρης λευκοσύνη. Κατάλαβα ότι ήταν τουρκικά, δεν μπορούσα να είναι ελληνικά, και έκλειξα αμέσως στο σπίτι. Εκεί το ΡΙΚ καλούσε όλους οι οποίοι ήταν στρατεύσιμοι παρουσιαστούς της μονάδας τους. Σε εμάς δεν άφησαν όπλα οι πραξικοπηματίες. Τα όπλα δεν πέρασαν εκεί. Παρουσιάστηκα στην μονάδα μου, η οποία ήταν απέναντι από το Χίλτον, εκεί που είναι στο τόπο σήμερα του Φλωράκη, ή το χρονοκομείο του Καλλιόντου. Εκεί ήταν η μονάδα μου, η οποία ήταν αλφα-ταυχή, ήταν 891 αλφα-ταυχή, μια αποθήκη στη Μαλικό χορηγήσα, παραχωρούσαμε τα πυροσβεστικά, βόμβες ή οτιδήποτε άλλο ήρθαμε σε διάφορες μονάδες οι οποίες έρχονται. είχα πάει με το αυτοκίνητο και το είχα αφήσει το αυτοκίνητο μέσα στο Cyprus, ρόλο του Cyprus, για αν θα βομβαρδίσει, δεν θα βομβαρδίσει το. Όταν πήγα να το κοιτάξω στην επιστροφή μου, έσκασε μια πολίτη, ένας όλμος. Παρολίγο να με σκοτώσει. Πήρα το κομματάκι εκείνο και τότε θα δόθη η διαταγή από τον υπεύθυνο εκεί της μονάδας να μεταφερθούμε στο Λιθροδόντα, που ήταν και το κεντρικό σημείο που είχαμε τις απαντήσεις του πνευματικού. Έμεινα εκεί μέχρι τις 14 Αυγούστου. 13 Αυγούστου. Η Μαρία είχε πιάσει τον μήνα της, ήταν έγκυος. Δεν μπορούσαμε να επικοινωνήσουμε. Και ανησυχούσα αν συμβεί τίποτε, ποιος θα την πάρει, πού θα πάει. Γι' αυτό ζήτησα άδεια από τον εξωμερικό για να μου επιτρέψει μια νύχτα για να επισκεφθώ την οικογένειά μου και να δω πού βρίσκεται η κατάσταση. Ήρθα πραγματικά το βράδυ της 13 Αυγούστου, ήρθα στο σπίτι. Στις 14 το πρωί άρχισαν τα τουρκικά αεροπλάνα να βομβαρδίζουν το χωριό μας και το μεταδάχτυλο. Ακόμα θυμάμαι ότι εκεί πίσω από την τζαμί είχαμε ένα πολυβολείο, το οποίο δεν ήταν πολύ μακριά από το σπίτι μας και επικεντρωνόντουσαν τα αεροπλάνα προσπαθώντας να καταστρέψουν το πολυβολείο εκείνο. Άρχισε πια όλη η οικογένεια να φεύγει. Είχα δύο μικρά παιδιά και ένα που το αναμέναμε να πάθει στη ζωή.
Εγώ βγήκα στον δρόμο και εκεί στο σπίτι μας υπήρχε μια από τις παλιές βρύσες που έκαναν οι άνθρωποι πριν χρόνια. Και ήταν μια ερμηνεία. Είναι το παράξενο το ότι την Κυριακή το βράδυ ήταν το ίδιο μόνιμο. Ότι βγήκα στον δρόμο και είχε ένα δημόσιο χωριό. Και αυτό το όνειρο βγήκε πραγματικότητα την Τετάρτη το πρωινό. Δεν είχε ούτε ανθρώπινη ψυχή πάνω πουθενά. Επέστρεψα σπίτι και λέω της μητέρας μου δεν έχει κανέναν, έχω φύγει όλοι. Τα παιδιά μου δεν ήξερα πού να πάω. Λέει μου, Μιχάλης πρέπει να φύγετε, τι να κάνω. Λέω ότι μα πού να πάμε, δεν ήξερα πού να πάμε. Ήξερα ότι το κάνω με την εκτικτιότητα, που είχα συγγενή, είχα μια θεία. Δεν ήξερα πού να πάω. Στο τέλος τα παιδιά μου με τραβούσαν, μαμά να φύγουμε, να φύγουμε. Και πήγαμε μέσα στα βαν, ο Μιχάλης μπροστά με το αυτοκίνητο. Το μικρό αυτοκίνητο και εγώ πίσω, διότι θα πήγαινε στο στρατό. Εγώ πίσω με το βαν. Μόλις βγήκα έξω, στον δρόμο, είχε μια οικογένεια η οποία ήταν δεύτερη μου αδέρφη με τον άντρα της και τον κόρη της. Και σταμάτησα. Λέω τους, δεν θα φύγετε, λέω τους εσείς. Καλή μου, παίρνετε μας και εμάς. Δεν θέλω να σας πάρω. Και κατέβηκα κάτω από το αυτοκίνητο, άνοιξα την πόρτα του. Αν μπείτε μέσα στο βαν, θα σας πάρω λοιπόν. Και άνοιξα την πόρτα του βαν πίσω και στη γωνιά υπήρχε μια γριά με τον άντρα της. Η θεωρήτησα με τα καλύψα. Και λέω μου, έπιασα και την έπιασα μέσα στο αυτοκίνητο. Τις έβαλε μέσα και έκλεισα την πόρτα. Και φύγαμε. Σιγά σιγά περάσαμε το χωριό, περάσαμε το νεκροδοχείο και βγήκαμε προς τον δρόμο, περάσαμε τον δρόμο της Μαροσιού και πήγαμε προς τα κάτω προς το γεφύρι του Kythrea. Το οποίο έμενε τον Αΐο Δημήτρη του Καϊματιού, εκεί που είναι πίσω από το Σοβάς, μαζί με τα υπόλοιπα χωριά.
Πήραμε όμως τη λαθασμένο δρόμο. Ενώ όλοι οι χωριανοί μας, φεύγοντας από το Neochorion και Kythreas, πήγαιναν προς την Άσια, Αγκαστίνα, για να πάνε προς τα μέρη εκείνα, προς τις βάσεις τις αγγλικές. Εμείς πήγαμε κατά μέτωπο εναντίον, που εκεί προχώρησαν τα του Kika Kattirtzi, γιατί το ταξί είχε πέσει μια μιλιά και προχώρησαν και έφταναν προς την περιοχή του Παιδιαίου. Και από Λευκοσία να πάμε Δευτέρα, Λαγατάνια Δευτέρα, γύρω να δούμε πάνω στα βουνά και να πάμε εκεί στην Κύπρο. Εκεί, στο αεροδρόμιο της Λαγατάνιας, συνέβηκε το πιο φρικτό πράγμα που έχω περάσει στη ζωή μου. Ένα αεροπλάνο κατάλυση πάνω από το αυτοκίνητο μας. Πάγωσα. Ανοίξαμε τις πόρτες του αυτοκίνητου. Η Μαρία την είχαν πιάσει υπόψη. Κατεβήκαμε από το αυτοκίνητο και κρυφτήκαμε όπου και όπου μπορούσε. Κάτω από τις ελιές. Όταν νομίσαμε ότι πέρασε ο κίνδυνος, συνεχίσαμε την διαδρομή μας προς την Κυπρόνα, όπου δεν πέρασε. Την επόμενη μέρα, που ήταν και 15 Αυγούστου, πήγαμε στον Περινά, γιατί τότε, επειδή υπεύθυνοι των μετασκηνώσεων, είχαν εκεί πολλά τρόφιμα, τα οποία θα τρέφουν τα παιδιά, είπα ότι τουλάχιστον θα έχουμε κάτι να τρώμε. Πήγαμε να μέχρι ότι να πάμε, και πολύ καλά, είχαν εξαφανιστεί, γιατί πεινασμένοι υπήρχαν πάρα πολλοί από την μόρφωση μεταξύ της εγκέφαλας από την Κυριακή μόρφωση 14-15 Αυγούστου. Και έμεινε εκεί που έπεστησα στην ομάδα και η Μαρία να ήμουν εκεί πάνω. Εντάξει, γνωρίστηκα κατάσταση στο Λιαντουλάκι, στο Λιαντουλάκι, στο Λιαντουλάκι. Πάω πίσω στην Λιαντουλάκι. Όσοι έμειναν πίσω στο χωριό μας, δεν έζησε έτσι. 72 άτομα έχουν σφαγιστεί, σκοτωθεί ή απελπιστεί. Η φωτογραφία αυτή εδώ, στο Τζάος, όταν το συνέλαβαν οι Τούρκοι, παραδόθηκαν. Επίσης, θα είδατε στην τηλεόραση για μια οικογένεια με 8 άτομα. Σκότωσαν μάνα, δύο ανήμπορους και έζησε ένα μικρό μωρό, η μικρή Μαρία, η οποία ήταν τότε 14 μηνών. Και όταν την βρήκε μια γειτόνισσά μας από εκεί, την βρήκε στο στήθος της μάνας να βυζάνει το αίμα της μάνας. Επέζησε η Μαρία, έγινε κοπέλα, παντρεύτηκε παραλληλίζει την περίπτωση της μικρής Μαρίας και την περίπτωση της μικρής Κύπρου. Πέρασε στιγμές δύσκολες για να επιβιώσει, ζάνοντας το αίμα της μάνας της, όταν μεγάλωσε, παντρεύτηκε, ευτύχησε. Έτσι ήταν η λογική μας. Θα πάμε στο Παπασί. Αν δεν μας κάμψουν το αγωνιστικό φρόνημα και αν δεν μας καταρρακώσουν το ηθικό, όπως προσπάθησαν και προσπαθούν και τα έχουν καταφέρει σε κάποιο βαθμό, δεν μπορεί ένα λαός ο οποίος αγωνίζεται να νικηθεί.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Καλησπέρα σας. Μετά από τον Ayios Amvrosios, ακούσαμε πριν λίγο να διαβάζει η Λίζα τις εμπειρίες της παραγωγής Κίκας. Εμένα να μου επιτρέψετε να πάω ένα χρόνο προηγουμένως για να καταλάβετε πώς ήταν η ατμόσφαιρα στον Ayios Amvrosios. Φαντάζομαι όπως σε όλες τις πόλεις, χωριά, υπήρχαν διάφορες παραδάξεις. Και το κακό δεν έγινε στις 15, προηγουμένως υπήρχαν οι δεξιοί, οι αριστεροί, οι κριτικοί, οι μακαριακοί, για όσους τα άρχισαν και όσους τα άκουσαν. Μένα με βρίσκει τώρα Απρίλιο του 1973, είχαν αναγραφεί στους τοίχους κάποια συνθήματα στο Ayios Amvrosios. Μια νύχτα ο ένας, την επόμενη νύχτα η άλλη παράταξη, τα αλλίωσαν. Χωριών είμαστε, ο ένας ήξερε ο ένας με τον άλλον. Τελικά ήρθαν στα χέρια. Όλοι να βγουν έξω από τους καθενέτες. Ήταν ένας περινός. Βγαίνουν από την εκκλησία. Και ακούω ακόμα έναν παιδί δίπλα μου να λέει «Ρε, με μαλώνετε για τους Τούρκους που έρχονται». Αυτό το παιδί, να το θυμάστε, είναι ο πιο μικρός από τους αγωνόμενους του Νεοchorion. Είναι ο Χριστάκης ο Καφίτης. Έναν παιδί 15 χρονών να του έρχεται η προαίσθηση και να λέει ότι οι μεγαλύτεροι δεν το έβλεπαν. Δεν θέλω να σας κουράσω. Τώρα θα μεταποιήσω ένα μισή μήνα πριν το πραξικόπημα. Εγώ τότε ήμουν τελειόφιλος του Γυμνασίου Ayios Amvrosios. Τελείωνα σε μερικές εβδομάδες και θα πήγαινα να καταδοκιμάσω την εθνική φρουρά. Όπως όλοι την ηλικία μου. Τότε ακούγεται ότι ότι θα έχουμε πρόβλημα με τους Τούρκους. Θα υπάρξει εισβολή. Εμείς, οι 17χρονοι, 18χρονοι, το ακούσαμε. Το ακούσαμε και ρώτησα κάποιον φίλο μου που ήταν στην 23 ΕΜΑ, Επιταρχία Μέσων Αρμάτων, στην Λακαδάμι. Και του λέω, ρε πουλί, να μόνο το ακούμε. Να γίνει πόλεμος. Τώρα στην επιπολαιότητα, μου λέει ο πουλής, θα γίνει τι, θα στείλουμε λίγες σφαίρες, να κάνουμε χάζι. Τώρα με την τεχνολογία, μια παρένθεση. Την περασμένη εβδομάδα ο Κούλης, ο Γιώργος, μου στέλνει μήνυμα φιλίας μετά από 40 χρόνια, είναι στην Κύπρο ο Πουλής. Και του λέω, ρε Πουλή, τώρα που γράφω, και χτες το Σάββατο είναι Κυριακή νομίζω. Πουλή, θυμάσαι τι είχαμε δει? Θα πούμε, ναι, το θυμούμε. Εσύ είχαμε πολλές. Και γιατί το λέω αυτό, και γιατί έμεινε στο μυαλό μου τυπωμένο ότι εμείς οι δύο, ξέρω προηγουμένως, είχαμε μια ιδέα το ότι θα επακολουθήσει. Δυστυχώς, οι ανευθυνότητες αωτέρων μας βρίσκει μετά από 40 χρόνια να στέκομαστε εδώ, στη θέα των τέχνης, να αναπολούμε τι έγινε, τι έπρεπε να γίνει και δεν έγινε. Τώρα, Αύγουστο, 15 Ιουλίου, πραξικόπημα, δεν μπορώ να πω, δεν ξέρω αν η Κίκα μπορεί να με διορθώσει, δεν θυμούμε τίποτε χαρακτηριστικό να είναι στις 15 στο χωριό, παρόλο που, εντάξει, να ακούσαμε στο ραδιόφωνο, αλλά δεν έγινε κάτι, ας πούμε, που στην εμπειρία την δική μου φυσικά, που να πω ότι σημάδεψε. Εμείς, συμμαθητές τότε, βλέπαμε να πάμε στο στρατό, την 5η, τις 18 του Ιούλη, πήγα στην Κερίνια. Πήγα στην Κερίνια, αγόρασα την παλίτσα μου, διότι στις 22 του Ιούλη θα πήγαινα στο στρατό. Πήγαμε με την παρέα και έδωσα ένα γυρό στην Κερίνια και με έβγαλε έναν περίπατο μέχρι τη Μητρόπολη. Μπροστά στη Μητρόπολη υπήρχε ένα άρμα της εθνικής φοράς. Από όλους τους τόπους, μπροστά από τη Μητρόπολη της Κερίνης, να είναι ένα άρμα. Και ρωτώ γιατί. Ποιον να σταματήσει τι. Τέλος πάντων. Πέρασαν 18, 19, είπαμε όλοι οι φίλοι Σαββάτων, να πάμε με Κερίνια, να κουρευτούμε για όσους έκαναν στο στρατό πρώτο νούμερο που λέμε, διότι το είχαμε σαν να κάνουμε πάρτι, πώς το λες. Αλλά εδώ μια με ξυπνά το Σάββατο 5 και 20 το πρωί με ένα όνειρο εφιάλτη. Βλέπω τον εαυτό μου σε αυτόν το όνειρο να πηγαίνω στην Κερίνια, να κατεβαίνω στη στάση των Neochorion, να κατηφορήσουμε κάτω από τους Σκανδιναβία όσους ξέρουν, να πάνε στα πρώτα φώτα, μετά κάνεις δεξιά να βρω στο ποταμό εκεί, για να πάμε προς τον κινηματογράφο, Κατσελή. Και εκεί κάτι παράλογο είχε γίνει, στο όνειρο, όλα είναι. Ένιωσα σαν κάτι να με χτυπά στον ώμο. Και κοιτάζω πίσω, τι βλέπω. Οι Τούρκοι να μας πετάνε πέτρες από τον Άγιο Ιλαρίωνα. Αυτό, αγαπητοί μου, στο όνειρο μου. Οι πέτρες μεγάλωναν και δεν με έβρισκαν εμένα, χτυπούσαν στην αμμουδιά, στο λιμάνι της Κερίνιας, για να τάρασαν τα κύματα. Μετά φυσικά ξύπνησα, ήταν όνειρο και έπεσαν οι πρώτοι μου βαδισμοί στην Κερίνια. Και τώρα τι να πεις, τι να κάνεις. Από πληροφορίες τίποτα. Ο σταθμός, όλοι ξέρουμε, ήταν ακόμα κλειστός. Τώρα 2:06 άνοιξε ο σταθμός να πει στον κόσμο τι γίνεται. Εμείς όμως, το σπίτι μου ήταν στην άκρη του χωριού. Και σε 50 μέτρα μπορούσα, έβλεπα την παραλία όλη και το κάστρο της Κερίνιας και πιο μέσα τα πλοία να βομβαρδίζουν την περιοχή. Και τώρα τι να κάνεις, σκεφτήκαμε όλοι να πάμε στους καφενέδες, πάμε στους καφενέδες της ηλικίας μου να πάμε στον αστυνομικό σταθμό, αφού ακούσαμε σε λίγο ότι όσοι ήταν ύστερα να πάνε παρουσιαστούς στις μονάδες τους. Εμείς δεν είχαμε ακόμα πάει στρατό, να πάμε στον αστυνομικό σταθμό να βοηθήσουμε. Πάμε στον αστυνομικό σταθμό με μια ακροαγία. Τίποτα. Να μας δώσουν όπλα. Τι όπλα. Τίποτα. Στην έκπληξή μου είδα δύο παιδιά από τη Χάρτσα, ήρθαν έσπι σε παρέλευση 2-3 ώρες στον Άγιο Αμβρόσιο να δούμε τι θα κάνουμε. Να κάνουμε τι. Άνθρωποι που έπρεπε να παρουσιαστούν στις μονάδες τους δεν παρουσιάστηκαν. Ήταν κάτω από τη Χαροκιά, όπως ξέρουν τον αστυνομικό σταθμό Αγίου Αμβροσίου, κάτω από τις πισωμιλιές του Δημοτικού. Τελικά ήταν όλα νομοδιοργάνωτα. Δεν θα σας κουράσω. Αυτά ήταν η εμπειρία μου στην πρώτη εισβολή. Δυστυχώς όμως, στις 22, όταν ήρθε η εγκεχηρία, εμείς όταν λέμε η εθνική φρουρά με διαταγές ανωτέρων, τηρούσαν την εγκεχηρία, ενώ οι Τούρκοι προέλαβαν. Προέλαβαν οι Τούρκοι, εμείς, όταν λέμε εμείς, την δυνάμει μας οπισθοχωρούσαν, ένωσαν το προγεφύρωμα, ήρθαν μέχρι τον Άγιον Επίκτητο, Πέλα Πάης, και μιλούμε τώρα από τις 22 ως τις 14, οι μάχες δεν σταμάτησαν. Μπορεί σε άλλες πόλεις να είχαν σταματήσει, αλλά στην επαρχία της Κερίνης δεν σταμάτησαν. Να σας θυμίσω χαρακτηριστικά στις 6 του Αυγούστου με τις μάχες του Καραμπάχ και της Λαβίδου. Το τι έγινε, τα βλέπαμε. Όπως είπα, το χωριό μου είναι στο ύψωμα και βλέπεις κάτω 20-25 μίλια, δεν είναι μακριά. Και μας βρίσκει τώρα 13 του Αυγούστου. Όλοι οι φίλοι είμαστε στον καφενέ, ακούσαμε ότι είχαν αποτύχει συνομιλίες. Τώρα μας βρίσκει 11-11.30 τη νύχτα. Τι γίνεται αύριο, ποιος ξέρει. Το αύριο μας να πάρει τα αεροπλάνα. Εγώ τότε στην εφηβεία μου δεν ήθελα να φύγω. Με τραβούσαν από το κρεβάτι. Ήρθε ο γαμπρός μου, η αδερφή μου, να φύγουμε. Στη βιασύνη τους, εγώ στην επιβολιότητά μου, δεν είχα πάρει ούτε το απολυτήριο του γυμνασίου. Δεν είχα πάρει ούτε ήδη πρώτης ανάγκης, αν θέλετε. Όπως ήμουν με έναν ποτό, και δεν σε πάρει να πούτσω τίποτα. Να μην τα πολυλογούμε. Φύγαμε μέσω Χάλης, τα κομματόδρομων Λευκόνικο, και ο δρόμος μας έβαλε στη Ξυλοδύμπου. Κάποιοι γνωστοί να μας φιλοξένησαν για μια εβδομάδα. Που είμαστε τη νύχτα, κατάστρωμα. Όλοι στο πάτωμα. Από εκεί μετά πήγαμε στα Πολυμίδια. Οι πρώτοι μήνες, οι πρώτες 10 μέρες λέγαμε πού πάμε, θα πάμε πίσω. Αλλά πριν να πάμε στις 10 μέρες, εδώ να κάνουμε μια μεγάλη εξομολόγηση για την απογοήτευση που ένιωσα τις 14 του Αυγούστου. Νομίζαμε, η εννιά η δική μου, η νεολαία, ότι ήρθε στην Ελλάδα μεταπολίτευσης και θα μας βοηθήσει με το διάγγελμα τότε του Καραμαλή ότι η Κύπρος κοίται μακράν, μας έκοψε τα γόνατα. Εκεί καταλάβαμε ότι είμαστε μόνοι μας. Εάν, και λέω εάν, δεν λέω εάν, τουλάχιστον πρώτα ήρθε η πρώτη μοίρα καταδρομών και έσωσε το αεροδρόμιο. Μετά άστο αν το πήρε. Τότε τέλος πάντων να το αφήσω εδώ. Είμαστε μόνοι μας. Και στη μοναξιά μας αυτό δεν βοήθησε. Να υπενθυμίσω τις 30 του Αυγούστου μια δολοφονική απόπειρα που έγινε στη Λευκοσία για τον γιατρό Λισαρίδη. Δεν πήγαινε ο Λισαρίδης, πήγαινε ο Δώρος Λοΐσου. Στην δυστυχία μας, στην προσφυγιά μας, βλέπαμε και την κατάδια μας. Εμείς ξεσπιτωμένοι, οι άλλοι στα σπίτια τους, αλλά ακόμα επικρατούσε η διχόνοια. Εντάξει, περάσαμε, η προσφυγιά είναι προσφυγιά. Όλοι τα ζήσετε, δεν θα πω περισσότερα. Έπρεπε να πάω στρατό. Δεν πήγα στις 22 που έπρεπε να πάω. Πήγαμε στις 11 του Ιούνιου. Μετά την βασική εκπαίδευση, μάλλον στις πρώτες 2 μέρες, είχα πάει στο Κεμπάφου, στη Γεροσκήπου, και από τη Γεροσκήπου θα πήγαινα στα Σταυροβούνη. Οπότε την τελευταία νύχτα, που θα τελειώσω με αυτή την εμπειρία, την τελευταία νύχτα μου είμαστε στο Γεροσκήπου, μας λέει όσοι θα πάτε στα Σταυροβούνη, άρχισε με έναν, πώς το λέμε, καψόνι, το οποίο είναι σωματική περδίωση. Και όταν είμαστε στο θάλαμο, πιο κάτω και τέλος πάντων, μου λέει ο Λοχίας παρουσιάζουμε, μου λέει από πού είσαι, από τον Άγιο Αμβρόσιο. Μου λέει τον ευθυνού το ξέρει. Λέω ναι, είμαστε συμμαθητές. Καθόμαστε στο ίδιο αφρανείο. Μου λέει, συγγνώμη φίλε μου, δεν θα το ξαναδείς. Έπαιζε στις μάχες του της Καραβάρη και Λαβίδου, στις 6 του Αυγούστου. Τότε καταλαβαίνετε ποιου να το πεις. Σου λέει ο άλλος από το πρώτο χέρι τι έγινε στο μακαριστό ευθύμιο. Πώς μπορείς να σημειώσω ότι ο πατέρας του έμεινε στη Λεδοσό και όποτε περνούσαμε από τα κολεβίγια τον έβλεπα. Από απέφευγα να περάσω από τον δρόμο εκεί. Είναι πολλές βαρετές οι εμπειρίες, δεν θέλω να σας κουράσω άλλο. Το τι με προβληματίζει εμένα είναι ένα μεγάλο γιατί. Το γιατί είναι όχι τα λαϊκά δικαστήρια, όχι τα απορίσματα για το φάκελο της Κύπρου, είναι το γιατί μετά από 40 χρόνια δεν βρέθηκε ένας να κάνει μια δικαστική έρευνα. Μια δικαστική έρευνα θα δικάσουν έναν άτομο. Θα δικάσουν έναν άτομο. Το τι αισθάνομαι εγώ, δεν ξέρω αν το είπα προηγουμένως, για μένα δεν ήταν διπλό το έγκλημα. Το έγκλημα ήταν ένα σε διαφορετικές φάσεις. Ευχαριστώ.
Να προσθέσω κάτι άλλο. Την εβδομάδα εκείνη που έγινε η εισβολή, πέρασε από το σπίτι μου ο Τάσος ο Μάρκου και είχε τηλεφωνήσει στο αεροδρόμιο. Θέλω να το πω γιατί πέρασαν από εκεί. Και ίσως ήμουν από τους τελευταίους ανθρώπους που τον είχα δει. Ήρθε να τηλεφωνήσει στο αεροδρόμιο και να στείλουν όπλα, διότι πήραν τους στρατιώτες χωρίς όπλα. Και τους είπε συγκεκριμένα, μας στείλετε, φέραμε τον κόσμο ως πρόβατα επισφαγής, λέει, χωρίς όπλα. Θυμάμαι αυτή την κουβέντα.
I'm conscious that there are English-speaking people in the audience, so if you all will speak in English,
you excuse me, I will sit down. I think I'll be a little bit more comfortable. As Theo said, there are English-speaking people, so I will try and speak in English, although I may revert to Greek sometimes because of certain feelings, so please forgive me if I switch languages. Now, where do I start? I'm not going to follow any of the previous speakers' format. I'm going to jump from year to year. I'm going to start from when I was born. I was born in Famagusta in 1951. Why is that important? Because in 1955, as you know, the Oka fight against the British started, and it finished in 1959 when I was 8. And I remember very well a lot of happenings because I was very close to the fight, although I was very young. One of the 4 who died in Ayios, my uncle, was living with us. He was going to the first gymnasium, and our house in Orange Grove was like an army track. We were keeping arms and everything, and we were inspected by the British on a daily basis, and the feeling was very strong. From the age of 5, I wanted to become a general and fight. We were making guns with small pieces of wood, and we were fighting. Why is this important? Because that made me realize that freedom was very important. We had to fight for our freedom, and it was worth fighting and dying for freedom. I saw my uncle being buried in 1959, and I remember the day very well. So anyway, I grew up in Famagusta, in Katabarosi, where the whole area was full of orange groves. I went to the secondary school there, and then first gymnasium in Famagusta. I spent the first 18 years of my life in Famagusta, the best years of my life, years I will never forget. I joined the army. I served in Famagusta, in Livingston, in Kythrea, and I knew the plans about invasion. In my mind, there was no chance of them invading without at least heavy losses, because the plans we had and the arms we had in those days, I finished my army in 1970, were enough to stop any invading army for days or weeks or cause them a lot of damage. Obviously, they could have captured Cyprus in the end after destroying it, but we could have caused them a hell of a lot of damage. What happened in 1974 when they invaded? Nothing. They just walked through and captured half of Cyprus because there was nobody to fight. So, having left the army in 1970, I came over to the UK to study for 4 years and returned back to my country. I would never stay for more than 4 years in the UK, and I've been here for 44 years now. Luckily or unluckily enough, preferably luckily enough, in 1974 I had traveled back to Cyprus on holiday, and I had driven through Europe using a tent. The tent is going to become important in the end. And we arrived in Limassol 3 days before the coup. When we landed there, I had a strange feeling. Honestly, I never felt like that insecure in my life in my own country. I knew there was something wrong. You could smell it, you could see something. We lost the sound.
It's okay.
You could see that something wasn't quite right. 3 days later, the coup started. And one day I was sitting outside with 10 kids, neighbors, cousins, and 2 of my friends, my ex-friends, came in a Land Rover holding an automatic gun and says, "What are you doing here? You have to go inside." And I said to someone, to one of them, who was my best friend at school, "Elena, are you calling me to go inside. He says, yes, you have to go inside. I said, what if we don't? He said, I'm going to shoot you. I said, really? You're going to shoot me? Anyway, a few days later, the invasion started as we all expected it. At least I was expecting it. We could hear it on the radio that the Turks were getting for invasion. The only people who didn't believe it was the army generals and whoever was in charge of Refugee program. We were called to join the army. Although I was in Loken, I was an officer, and I had to join at Famagusta. And we went there. I was put in charge of 20 people. And funnily enough, my friend appeared again holding an automatic gun. He says, okay, get your soldiers and get onto the lorry to go to Kythrea. I said, where are their arms? He says, no arms, you're going to get arms there. I said, no. Nobody from my team will go unarmed. I said, you either give us the arms or you can go. He said, how will we shoot you? I said, you can shoot us here, but no one from my team will go unarmed. And we did it. In the end, they gave me one shotgun and a bag of cartridges. And I said, what are we going to do? Fight, go shooting for sparrows or partridges or what? Anyway, he said, take your soldiers and go and hide in the orange groves and we're going to send you arms. So, back to the oranges. We were there for days, starving to death. Obviously, I knew a lot of people, so we used to go to their houses or their shops and manage to feed. And with us, there were maybe a couple of hundred other soldiers from other groups waiting for arms. We waited for days, nothing was coming. Aeroplanes were bombing Famagusta heavily, even the orange groves. I was borrowing a friend's motorbike and I was running to town. Having gone there as a holiday, I took my best camera and I was taking photographs of everything. The bombings, the killings, the people hanging dead from the hotel that split up on the coast of Famagusta, if you remember. Every time I was there taking photos, but unfortunately I left my camera when I left. In the end I said to everybody, you know, you take your way because nothing's going to happen here. My brother was in the army and we kept in touch. We knew when the Turks were coming, and when they were outside Famagusta, about 10 miles, just get everybody and go because, you know, nobody can stop them. There's nobody trying to stop them. So we got into our cars and loaded as many people as we could. My suitcase was still unpacked. My mother said, take a suitcase. I said, people are fighting for their lives, I'm going to take my suitcase. And I left everything else, it was unpacked. And I was wearing a short pair of trousers in green, which I still have. If I remembered, I should have brought it here actually. It's still in my wardrobe at the very bottom. I'm keeping it to go back to Famagusta one day. So we left Famagusta and drove at night time with no lights. We stayed outside and were in some orange groves that we didn't know what it was or whose it belonged to. Spent the night. The next day we went to the British bases outside the lake, where my father had a friend, and he gave us his garage to stay because his house was shared by another 10 families. It was 30 of us all together, so not everybody could sleep in the garage. So I put up my tent, which was in my car. And it was the first tent, I believe, set up to house refugees. And it wasn't a haki color, it was a color bought in England, so it was a different tent. And even having a tent, I had to sleep outside because obviously there were women and children and they had priority, so we slept outside. on the rocks under the trees. Having a British car with me, I was allowed to travel through the Kythrea and go to Kythrea, to Larnaca and buy some food, because we were there without food, without anything. You know, we couldn't cook, we couldn't. But in the British bases, you couldn't cross. But because I had a British car, they used to allow me to come to Larnaca or go into Larnaca and do some shopping. I never joined the army as such. I was allowed to leave the army in September. I took my car, my two sisters, who were 14 at the time, the sister of a friend of mine who was 13, the sister of another friend who was 12. So with 5 youngsters and another cousin who was 18, we drove through Europe in 3 days. We couldn't afford to stay anywhere or too much because we didn't have much money. We had only one small suitcase. We arrived in Dover, and the guy came to me and says, "Who are you?" And I gave him my papers, and he says, "Who are these young women with you?" And I said, "My sisters and the sisters of my friends. Why are you bringing them over, and where are your suitcases?" And this is our suitcase. It's all 5 of you with this. I said, "Yes. This is all we have, this is all we have left." Anyway, we are allowed in with permits monthly and 6 monthly and a lot of permits to stay here. A few years later, I had some Turkish Cypriot friends who came from Badili and refused to go back to Cyprus after the invasion, believe it or not. In the end, they did go back. One was an old man. In those days, he was 65. Now, I think he wasn't that old. I'm near that age. And he came back and he says, "I can get you back to Cyprus to see your house." And I said, "No, I can't really risk it." Anyway, year after year, he insisted. After I got married and I had my first son, my father had died in 1980, and I named my son Anastasios after my father. And I said, "Now I can go. At least if I'm killed, I have my son who will carry the name and my father's name." So I did go, wearing, believe it or not, a lobby t-shirt. And when I tried to cross, I had hair. You know, they wouldn't allow me. It was before the auditorium had opened. My friends were there for Turkish Cypriots. They put a strong fight. In the end, they did allow them to cross. But they said, "You're not using your car, you have to use one of our cars with one of our drivers." It was police, Turkish policeman. So we agreed, we had no choice. And they said, "You can drive anywhere except Famagusta." And I said, "But I come from Famagusta." He said, "Famagusta is out of bounds." So we were driving with this guy for a couple of hours. We got friendly. I had a camera with me. They allowed me to go through without searching at all, actually, surprisingly enough. And in the end, he says, "I'll take you to Famagusta, but promise not to take any photographs, because if they find them, they will get you and me together and probably shoot us both." So I said, "Okay, I won't take any photos of Famagusta." And he drove us to Famagusta. And he says, "No, you have to tell me how to go." And I was following the bus route because I was a bit lost. We got in the center of Gatherers, and I said, "Stop here, I don't know where I am." And I was looking around, and minutes later I could see the cinema and a friend's shop, and I said, "For Jesus Christ, I mean, this is the center of gatherers. How can this be?" It looked like a place from Anatolia. It was dirty, unrecognized. It was something different. Anyway, I said, "Okay, drive through, and we will find orange grove." I forgot to tell you that before my visit, my parents were dreaming about our house in Famagusta almost every night, and they were telling us about their dreams. I personally never had a dream about Famagusta or anything like that. The night before, I suppose I was a bit worried. I went and bought a cheap camera in case they take it. I had a dream. And our first house was next to an orange grove. The orange grove was full of orange trees. It was green, it was like a paradise. And in the side there was a small house where we had the irrigating machinery. Ήταν πληστό. That was the only red spot on in the orange grove. And in my dream, I saw that there were no trees at all in the orange grove. The whole thing was empty, dead, with dead trees and red soil. And where the red little house was, that was demolished, and there were bullets. Corn. What's the kind of tree? Anyway, we were driving around, and as soon as we came across the orange grove, I saw an empty space with dead trees and orange and red soil. And I immediately broke down and started crying. And my Turkish friend was crying even louder, saying to me, I'm sorry. I said, nothing to do with you, not your doing. I said, just drive away, I don't want to see anything. And we just drove around and saw that the house wasn't there, and it was corn planted there. Now, if anybody had told me about this dream, I would never believe it. But I saw it, I experienced it, and I know it was true. I've never experienced anything like that again. And I haven't been back either. I suppose this is my story. Now, had we fought the invading army, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to invade. At least they wouldn't cause so much damage. They wouldn't be able to occupy so much of our land. And it would have cost them in lives, it would have cost them dearly. And we would have proved that we were fighters. Instead, we were fighting between us. We were notified. We were told they were not invading. And the story keeps going on in the same way. So unless we unite and we fight for our own freedom and we fight for ourselves, we should not expect anybody to help us. Why should they help us when we can't help our own selves? You know, we have to be prepared to fight for ourselves and then expect others to help. Don't get upset if they don't help. If we are not fighting our own battle, we shouldn't expect anybody else to fight. I don't think there are people fighting for, at least not many anyway. So this is my message.
I can speak loud enough. I'd like to thank Michael, Maria, and George. Many here tonight have their own story to tell, and I hope we can repeat this again at another time, another occasion. But I hope we don't need to repeat it. I think that's probably what I should say. We shouldn't need to repeat it. The next time is for us all to go back to Famagusta, Ayios Amvrosios, both who are languages. I would like to now for Nikos, please, I think, for the second song, and then we move straight into the Aurora for your brief. Thank you.
Sin συνταρακτικά, κύριε Κashis, αυτά που ακούσαμε απόψε. Να πούμε το ελάχιστο, συνταρακτικά.
Τουλάχιστον εμείς ζούμε.
Σίγουρα. Το επόμενο τραγούδι λέγεται «Κύπρος αγαπημένη». Το έγραψε πέρυσι και αντιπροσώπευσε με την παροικία μας των Κυπριακών Διαγωνισμών Κυπριακού Τραγουδίου στο ΡΙΚ το 2013.
Να περπατώ στα ξένα, αν όλα ξέρει η ζωή σε ένα μεγάλο ψέμα. Έφερε να η τύχη μου, ζω τώρα στα πέρα, το πεπρωμένο μια ζωή, να τραγουδώ για σένα. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος μου προδομένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Κι ας μην δουν απόδειμο, κι ας κουνηθούν το γέμα, Τελετία, δεν είμαι που τα ξένα. Κι ας με λαλούσει πρόσφυγα, κι ας με τραβάει το ρεύμα, στο σπίτι μου, στον τόπο μου, έρχομαι κάθε μέρα. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος μου προδομένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Έτσι πως σε έκαμασαι, Κύπρος μου να δακρύζεις, τώρα που σε μοιράσασαι, πώς σου με λυγίζεις. Μέρες πλακαλύτερες, πάρε να ξαναζήσεις, πάρε να ζήσεις ελεύθερη, ελεύθερη και ενωμένη. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος μου προδομένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη. Να τραγουδώ για λόγους σου, Κύπρος μου προδομένη, και μοναχά για χάρη σου, Κύπρος αγαπημένη, Κύπρος αγαπημένη, Κύπρος αγαπημένη.
Όλους μας η καρδιά στην πατρίδα μας. Κάτι καταλάβουμε την φίλη μου Φωγή. Ευχαριστώ.
I'll hand over to Nick. Good evening, everyone. And let me also extend my welcome on behalf of Lobby for Cyprus to everyone. Special welcome to His Excellency the High Commissioner. Good to see you and thank you for coming this evening. Also, I'd like to remind everyone that actually this is the Kyriakos Christodoulou Memorial Lecture. Every year at Theodore Deknis we have on the Wednesday of this week a lecture, and for the last few years since Kyriakos died we have decided to call it the Kyriakos Memorial Seminar, and having heard those very moving personal accounts, two of them from Ayios Amvrosios, I know that Kyriakos would be delighted that there were two from Ayios Amvrosios, and
was many from other villages, so let's remember him in that way. And also listening to George just now, who was talking about how, because we are divided amongst ourselves, we have made life easier for the Turks and other enemies. And what we are now about to hear is another area where, if we're not careful, we may be causing division amongst ourselves. Fortunately, we have Theodora, now Dr. Theodora, so congratulations, Theodora. And Theodora can tell you herself about what she's been doing earlier this week in The Hague. But Theodora's going to talk to us about a very, very important issue that hasn't really had the coverage that it deserves in Cyprus, and it's the issue about who can vote in any referendum. We know that when a solution is imposed upon us yet again, there will be another referendum, and the issue is who can vote. Can refugees from Cyprus who are now settled in England vote in such an election, in such a referendum? Theodora's going to explain everything to us. So over to you, Doctor.
I want to start by thanking the refugees for sharing their experiences with us. And it's clear that even 40 years after the event, all the memories are still very raw and painful. And it's these injustices that we've heard about that gives us strength to continue the struggle for freedom in Cyprus. As Nick said, what we're talking about now is the latest initiative for Lobbies for Cyprus, which is to gain the right of all refugees and in fact all victims who live in the diaspora, so that would include us, the right to vote in any referendum for a future settlement to the Cyprus issue. And the question we asked ourselves when Theo and I and everyone else at Lobby decided to take this campaign upon us was, why should the refugees, who by definition do not live in Cyprus, why should they not decide what happens to their villages and their churches and their graveyards and their homes? So that's what's behind this campaign. For those of us who don't know the background, I think there might be a few, I'll just do a quick overview. So in 1974, the refugees depart, as we heard. Turkey's myth is that these refugees voluntarily often left their homes and abandoned them. And in fact, those who decide to go to the Turkish Immovable Property Commission sign a declaration which states that they abandoned their homes. So nothing about the forceful displacement. And as we've heard, this could not be further from the truth. Turks didn't just come along and find the empty villages. They invaded, brutally attacked Cyprus. They killed, they tortured, they raped, they intimidated, they abused non-Turkish Cypriots living in the northern areas. And Greek Cypriots had no choice but to flee for their lives. And this is something that we need to keep reminding people, because Turkey pumps a lot of money into revising history to their version. And what's preventing people from returning is, of course, the Turkish army. So legal terminology for you. What happened to the refugees in Cyprus is known as forceful displacement. And it is an international war crime, which is classified as ethnic cleansing. And in fact, what Turkey continues to do, which is the transfer of Turks from the mainland to Cyprus, is also an international war crime. And that's what Nick was alluding to, was a case that I was involved in, which was filed on Monday. It's a complaint to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to initiate an investigation into Turkey's war crimes in Cyprus, focusing exclusively on this ethnic cleansing crime of transfer of populations. We can talk about that more in the question time if anyone has any questions. So we know what happened to the refugees for war crime. We know it's a violation of their human rights. However, some would have us believe that between 1974 up to 2004, the refugees lived happily ever after. We had images of a prosperous Cyprus, put forward to point out and illustrate the point. Obviously, that was before the economic crisis. What is ignored, if anyone's actually visited any of the refugee settlements, so the temporary homes that these refugees were moved into, they will see that they are temporary. They are not, they're very small, they're very old, and they don't live in the lack of luxury, as people would have us believe. And the resilience of the Greek Cypriots who rebuilt their lives and their economy after the invasion is not something that should be used against them to prevent them from returning. And it shouldn't take away their status as a victim. So a lot of people will say, like, well, who will go back to the north even if we get it back? You know, the victims are clearly not happy with the situation. So, as we know, my personal experience from talking to many refugees over the years is that they live and die with the dream of returning. They left their homeland, but they still dream of returning. And this picture of our friend, the late Kythrea, who's taken in that corner, and what he holds is a single bag that he left Ayios Amvrosios with. And he is one of many who unfortunately die with that dream still burning in their hearts. So in 2004, the refugees of the diaspora, as we heard from Nick, were forgotten. A little known fact is who actually got to vote on behalf of the Republic of Cyprus. Those who got to vote on behalf of the Republic of Cyprus were those who had an existing right to vote, and in other words, were registered on the electoral roll. This did not include any of the refugees living in the diaspora who did not hold the right to vote. On the other hand, who got to vote on behalf of Turkey, amongst others, the instruments of ethnic cleansing, the Turkish settlers. They were allowed, who were being imported into Cyprus to change demographics and so forth. They were allowed to vote. So what of the refugees? Well, given the length of time that has passed, it's more than likely that the vast majority of refugees in the diaspora have lost their right to vote. Because in order to vote, you need to be resident 6 months before any election. So how many of you would satisfy that criteria if you're a refugee? Very few. And what about the refugee children and grandchildren who've inherited these land and properties? They're more than likely to not even hold Cypriot citizenship, even though they're entitled to, let alone the right to vote. So in 2014, as we said, Lobby for Cyprus decided to give refugees and the wider victims, because it's not only those who were displaced in 74. I'm fortunate enough, I guess, to not be from the occupied areas. But I should have a right to decide on the future of Cyprus. After all, it is my homeland. So Lobby for Cyprus thinks that refugees and the wider group of victims should have this voice. And that those displaced shouldn't be punished twice. One, the first time when they were displaced in 74, and second, the fact that they didn't have the right to vote in 2004. So we need to give ourselves a voice. The fact that they were forcefully displaced is not something that should factor against them. On the contrary, it's a reason for them to be given the right to decide whether they are permanently displaced or whether they're repatriated. So they must be empowered to have a say in their own future. So some boring bit about the law. I am a lawyer after all, so apologies. But this is important because it's the law that can grant us this right. Referendums are different to elections. So what we're asking for here is not the right for us to go vote for who the president is or the local mayor. It's simply for the right to vote in a referendum which will determine the settlement of the Cyprus issue. And so different laws exist for the referendums. There are a general law. I'll skip over that. So one option would be to change the general law so that we in the diaspora can vote in any referendum. So whether it's a referendum on the settlement of Cyprus, whether it's a referendum for Cyprus to leave the EU, for example. Or, alternatively, the Cyprus government can adopt a special law on the referendum. As they did in 2004, they adopted a special referendum which extended the times that were available for voting on an ANPAC. So they could quite easily adopt a special law which would extend the scope of who is entitled to vote to include those in the diaspora. And this would be the better option. It's limited in scope and so more likely than not to obtain support from Cyprus, because we know how precious Cyprus is about their political parties and their allegiances and so forth, and so this would not affect who runs for president, etc. The question is, are we making this up, or we just decided that Cyprus deserved this and so let's go ahead and make something up? No, you can see this in other countries. The most recent example is that of South Sudan. So when South Sudan had to decide whether they should split or remain part of Sudan. And it's interesting to note what the categories of people were here. You were entitled to vote in that referendum if one of your parents was from an indigenous population resident before 56, or if you had traceable ancestry to an ethnic community without any requirement for residence, or because one of your parents or grandparents had permanent residence. Another example is found in the Dayton Peace Accord. So this was the peace accord following the war in former Yugoslavia. And interestingly enough, in the Dayton Peace Accord, there was a clause which said that refugees would not be excluded or lose their eligibility to vote simply because they were away from their homes. So the right to vote would be maintained, and it was based simply on citizenship and not residence. And the reason why? Clear. They said that to exclude refugees from the voting process would compromise the legitimacy of the democratic process. So it's plain and simple democracy. So we need to be clear also that what our campaign focuses on is what is classed under the 1960 Constitution as the Greek Cypriot electoral roll, because we don't have any control over the Turkish Cypriot electoral roll. So our focus is on that electoral roll alone. As we saw in 2004, Turkey determined who voted on their behalf, and the Republic of Cyprus determined who would vote on behalf of the Greek Cypriot electoral roll. So the eligibility to vote of the victims of forced displacement in Cyprus will be based on grounds beyond the strict definition of refugee. So we're not only asking for those who were there in 74 and had to flee because of the invasion, but we're asking for a much broader definition of victim. So what criteria should be applied? You should have on your chairs somewhere, most of you, the list of criteria that Lobby for Cyprus came up with in consultation with a number of refugees. So essentially what we did was we asked each refugee that we needed to complete a form to tell us about their story. What was their position in 74? What is their position now? In order to be able to obtain the criteria that would be necessary to enable them to vote. So it's in English and Greek on your chair. So the first criteria proposed is that, well, you have to be 18, but obviously because we're in the diaspora, we would not be resident in Cyprus. So ordinarily you would have to be. For this, we would say no. And in addition to those two criteria, we would suggest that anyone who was resident in Cyprus before 1974 should be entitled to vote on the referendum. Secondly, or alternatively, anyone who was born in Cyprus before 74, and this can be attached with a further additional requirement of either having ancestral links to Cyprus, having residence status before 74, or being entitled to Cypriot citizenship. Thirdly, anyone with property ownership in the occupied areas. So this would include those who inherited property. Fourthly, if anyone is entitled to Cypriot citizenship. And this one's important because whilst many of us are entitled to Cypriot citizenship, very few of us have gone through the bureaucratic process of actually obtaining Cypriot citizenship. So we propose that it's anyone who's entitled to Cypriot citizenship. And fifthly, its ancestral link. So this one you'll see similarities to the South Sudan referendum criteria. So anyone whose parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents originate from Cyprus. So what are the next steps? This is the political steps. So next step, we have the idea. It's either the minister responsible for the portfolio, so this would be the Minister of Interior, would propose the law. Or alternatively, it would be a member of Parliament proposing the law before the House of Representatives. It would then go through some vetting process and eventually be voted through by the House of Representatives. We've assessed uneducatedly that it's unlikely that the Minister of Interior will propose the law. However, we will try. That is the easiest route. So we will first approach the Minister of Interior. Failing that, we will seek a member of Parliament to propose the law. And in the meantime, we will seek support from political organisations and parties in Cyprus. But before we do that, so that our proposal does not get buried under paperwork and forgotten, we at Lobby have decided to garner as much support as we can from the diaspora around the world. And listed here are some of the organisations that have so far given written support for the initiative and are calling upon the government to change the law. If your organisation hasn't done so, you can contact Theo or myself and we can help you draft the letter. The more support we have, the less likely they're going to ignore us. I can't carry on without quoting from an ancient Greek source. This time I'm going to cite Eurydice. And Eurydice said, "There is no greater sorrow on earth than to lose one's native land." And a lot of us in this room know exactly what he means by that. So getting the refugees and the victims the right to vote is a matter of justice, but above all, we at Lobby believe that it's the final line of defense against losing Cyprus from
Well done.
Thank you very much, Theodora, and I think that shows you the type of work that we do at Lobby for Cyprus for those who are new to the organisation. Theo, how long do we have for questions, Stephen?
15 minutes. 10
Okay. Right, we've got 15 minutes for questions. We allowed the personal stories to go on a bit longer tonight because they were so moving and so important. You know that I'm a difficult chairman, so I'm not going to allow any speeches. If anyone speaks for more than about half a minute, I'm going to stop them. I want questions only and short questions at that, okay? Right. Lady Rue. Speak up a bit, please.
I never knew anything about Cyprus before until Andrew Nicholas told us. But is it feasible? What you're talking about, would it actually happen? How long would it take?
You're talking about the referendum now?
Yeah.
It's a good question. It's highly feasible. It's, like I said, it's not something we've invented. The process exists. The previous examples exist. Most recently in South Sudan. How long the process would take would depend on how supportive the politicians are in Cyprus. And that is why we're seeking support from organisations from the diaspora in Australia, America, Canada, South Africa, essentially everywhere, so that it would help speed up the process.
It's ladies first, okay, boys. Ali.
I'm not certain if there's something I'm not understanding here. It seems if the demographic has changed of Cyprus, and in the occupied area everybody's voting, surely it benefits, from the point of view of the minister that you said would not put this forward, it benefits Cyprus to have refugees in the diaspora voting. That would sort of balance things out somewhat.
I mean, it's unfair on the minister because we haven't asked him, so he may support this. But yes, I mean, it would make sense to us. When I tell people that in 2004 refugees and diaspora are not yet to vote. They're shocked. And their first question they ask is, so why hasn't the law changed? Why is the lobby only just deciding to do it? Where is everyone else? So yeah, to us it makes sense.
Any other ladies before I move on to the boys? And the only other point I would add, Ali, is of course there's political considerations as well. If it's thought that the diaspora is likely to vote against a particular solution that's put on the table, and lobby will make no secret we would oppose most of the settlements that have appeared to date, why would they want us to vote? Right.
I would say, why is it, why on earth, or how on earth is it up to the lobby, bless you, to put forward this, which I believe is a fantastic idea. The government of Cyprus should have come at this with their own initiative, long before 40 years. Don't expect your good self and Dr. and Feldon, blessing Kythrea to do these kind of sterling efforts. Why isn't the Cypriot government itself doing these things? And as beloved singer Mr. Savili said very clearly, your foremost thing. And then government, who are we frightened of? And why don't we take the initiative in our own hands? And as Mr. Mukhtari said, well,
I can't speak on behalf of the Cyprus government. I'm not asking the High Commissioner to, but if you'd like to, he's very welcome to. But over the years, lobby has created the agenda for many, many discussions. I mean, it's not just this one. We started the discussion about colonists, cultural destruction, all sorts of issues, property ownership, all those cases, Loisidas and those cases, they all came from lobby. We don't shout from the rooftops what we do, we just do our job. We don't talk about what we've done. This is another fantastic initiative. If we don't do it, I can't see anyone else doing it. I can't speak for people in Cyprus, but at least we're doing it.
To be fair to Cyprus politicians, there was a proposal by the Green Party which died along its way, and that was, the requirement would be citizenship. So that would exclude a lot of people from that. And we have to say that we have support from the House of Representatives President. Mr. Miro has publicly stated his support for this initiative, and they've been very useful in drafting the law and providing us with the work. So on that point, we have no complaints.
People say like myself, parents came from Cyprus before independence, so my parents came years before independence in the 60s, so they weren't actually citizens in the new Republic of Cyprus, part of the British Empire. With people like myself who were born in England, and then you correctly?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that part of your question. Our proposal would be that anyone with ancestral links should have the right to vote, and because in the old days people used to get married much earlier, we proposed 3 generations. So if your parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents are of Cypriot ancestry, then you should be entitled to vote.
An interesting, if I may, thank you, an interesting point when I was discussing it with quite a few people in the community of what a great idea this would be for the rights of the refugees. There was this hypothesis that was put forward to me saying that, well, Theo, do you know what's going to happen? I said, yeah, all refugees would vote from their hearts what they want for the Republic of Cyprus. There's no it won't. You know what will happen? The political parties here in the United Kingdom will take control of all these refugees, and they'll make them vote based on what they're going to vote in Cyprus. The political parties are going to vote in Cyprus. Now, did everyone understand what I was trying to say there? Does that make sense at all? Do you think we here, the refugees, are going to listen to what the political parties are going to tell us to do here in England and vote for what those that wish to do in Cyprus? Of course not. We will vote independently of any political party. And that is lobby's principle. We're non-aligned and non-politically driven.
Thank you, Theo. Just to remind everyone, although Lobby is a political organisation, it is a non-party political organisation. And we've always said that Lobby is a philosophy, and that philosophy is what you see behind you, I think, the 3 R's. Gentlemen there.
What I wanted to ask is there any backup proposal that you've got to increase the acceptability of your proposal along the lines of weighting, to weight the individual criteria? So in other words, someone that may have ancestral links may get the right to vote, but his vote only counts as a third, if you like, of a vote of someone that's resident. Some sort of weighting proposal for all the criteria.
No. We believe that democracy is one man and one vote. Whoops, that was very sexist of me. One person, one vote. I mean, that's not how democracy, I don't think that's how democracy should work. If you have the right to vote, it should count equally. It shouldn't be weighted depending on your residency, or your ethnicity, or location, or anything. And that's one of the critical points that we have against by the Black Federation, is the weighting of a minority. But that's another story.
Another seminar.
Another seminar.
Hi, Commissioner.
Yeah. Since the gauntlet was thrown at me, I pick it up. As a High Commissioner, I'm here doing the work of everyone. Certainly, I don't want to get involved in party politics. I am above party politics, representing the president and representing any government. Now, on the issue at hand, if I do, thank you, but others didn't get it, so it's not fair. On the issue at hand, it is really admittedly awkward if you have the settlers, who by definition is a crime against humanity, a crime against humanity. If you have the settlers voting on a referendum, in which, by the way, they were not allowed to vote in East Timor, the settlers in Indonesia invaded East Timor in 1975. And I'm not sure when, but Theodora, when was the referendum? But the referendum took place maybe 15, 20 years ago. If not earlier than that, and the Indonesia colonized East Timor, and they were insisting that the colonizers have the right to vote. In the end, the United Nations said, and whoever else said, I have to really check my memory because I have memory lapses. In the end, the United Nations said no, because this would not be a genuine will of the indigenous people. Now, if you have a situation like that, and you have people like Michalis and so many others that lost everything, isn't it logical? To me, it's logical. I'm here, of course, I do not know in which process the whole issue is right now, but I know that Theo spoke with the President, with the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I was there when you spoke to him. And it is important that this thing is being said as one of the issues that the community wants to do. And Cyprus is listening. It's not that Cyprus is not listening. Now, when it comes to party politics, when it comes to parliament, what party A or B or C or D will do, that transcends my humble existence. What I can tell you, and I'll finish, is to I don't want to say congratulate, but to thank Lobby for this event. I think it was very, very moving for all of us. And if we do not stand up for our rights, as it was rightly said, nobody else is going to do it for us. Now, in the end, we do have democracy, and it's never wise to argue with the outcome of democracy, provided things are not, of course, flawed in all these things. I want to say that it was, well, I think I should stop because you did say it's been really, I have half minutes, so it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. I think it's probably time that we draw this to an end now. And am I right in thinking that Nikos is going to
Yes,
we can have the national anthem from Nikos, is that right?
For all of us.
All of us, okay. Well, before we have the national anthem, thank you very much for everyone for attending tonight. It's a very hot evening, and I know that it's hard sometimes to sit here in the heat and listen to us, but thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I did say, or I did not say, that the High Commission and the team is at your disposal. The High Commission is your home. All Cypriots High Commission is their home, and if you think I'm bluffing, you need to call the bluff.
Thank you.
Okay?
Σε γνωρίζω από τη κόψη του σπαθιού την τρομερή. Σε γνωρίζω από την όψη που με πια μετράει τη γη. Απ' τα κόκκαλα βγαλμένη των Ελλήνων τα ιερά και σαν πρώτα αγριωμένη και ελευθεριά και σαν πρώτα αδειωμένη και